My name is Nina, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer when I was 34 years old. Beyond my diagnosis, because I am more than my diagnosis, I love to dance, travel, cook, attend live music shows, attend comedy shows. I like to incorporate humor in everything that I do because life can be life in. So we definitely need to make sure that um, we can center joy in different moments of our lives. And I love spending time with my family and friends. So I first started noticing a hardening under my left armpit, but it wasn't a marble or a pea. Usually, what doctors say that we should be looking out for in regards to potentially experiencing a lump that might be malignant. Mine was more of like a strip. And so at first, it was kind of hard to tell what it was, but I definitely understood that something wasn't normal and and that I had never had this hardening under my armpit before. So I went to my doctor to get a physical breast exam, and I was told that because of my age and having no history of breast cancer and having dense breast tissue, that it was probably nothing. A year later, I went back and I said, the lump has grown bigger, and I've noticed that there is a dimple in that area, almost like a cellulite dimple, for example. Come to find out later that that was the tumor that was pulling on my skin. And I mentioned that, I had never seen my breast change in this way. At first, I thought it was maybe because of like weight gain. Sometimes you grow extra fat in your breast tissue area. Um, but that's when I advocated for myself again and requested to get a mammogram. And so then when I got the mammogram, very quickly afterwards, the radiologist came out and was like, you have a lump in your left breast and in your armpit, and it's abnormal. And we need to get a biopsy immediately. When I was given my sheet of the BIRAD categories, I had a BIRAD category of 5, which is, saying that there's like over a 90% chance that these lumps were malignant. Um, but these things can be, false positives or whatnot. And so I started doing a mad dash of research online, looking up, what does cancer look like on an ultrasound? And what does a BIRAD category even mean? They pulled me in the next day, and I found out at that time that I had stage 3 cancer because the tumor was not only in my breast, and from start to like the nodes that were traveling, it was about 8 centimeters long. But that all of my lymph nodes under my armpit were pretty much infected, as well as my internal mammary gland. Um, and then 2 months later, after a series of exams, kind of coming into the doctor's office multiple times a week, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer when they found the cancer had metastasized to my spine. My initial reaction to finding out that I had cancer was of shock, of anger, and frustration. I was told about my treatment plan, and the reason why I am smiling a little bit is because like the way that they were explaining what was happening just like didn't stop. Like it was just one thing after the another. And I at one point I just like laughed, kind of that nervous laugh that you make when you're just shocked about like, oh, this is serious. Like this isn't just some, yeah, we're just going to get this done. So my treatment plan involved um 6 months of chemotherapy, breast surgery, which ended up being a lumpectomy, which I was lucky enough to experience because originally it was supposed to be a mastectomy, but the chemo at that point worked well enough to have only done a lumpectomy. Um, after my breast surgery, I had to do, I think it was about 29 plus rounds of radiation coming in every day, 5 times a week, to get radiation on my spine as well as on my breast. Chemo was probably one of the roughest points in the experience of trying to treat my cancer. Um, Usually the first week was the worst after you got an infusion. Um, and I had every symptom that was in the book. I was told, oh, you may not experience this. We experienced all of it. So that included hair loss. I know I've got my curly hair back now, but I used to be bald and beautiful. Um, I got neuropathy, joint pain, really dry skin, acne. I had over 13 mouth sores in my mouth at the same damn time that I've never ever experienced before. Um, I had a lot of GI issues. I'll spare you some of the details, but included a lot of, well, I'll just tell you, included a lot of nausea, vomiting, constipation, and diarrhea at the same time. Didn't realize all of those things can happen at the same time. Um, I was incredibly fatigued and tired. Little tasks, walking, putting sheets on my bed, getting out of bed, putting my clothes on, those were incredibly difficult tasks for me to do. And, before cancer, I was such a whippersnapper. I just had a lot of energy and I could just kind of do all things and do multiple things at once. And going through chemo in particular and the whole experience really taught me to slow down, be incredibly present, and kind of just take care of whatever the immediate next step was. And so having to slow down physically, because of my lack of energy, my fatigue, and the pain that I was experiencing was such a different, yeah, and difficult experience to go through. Um, Other symptoms I experienced during chemo was like brain fog and yeah, everything just seemed kind of like fuzzy during that time, I think. Um, During radiation, I experienced basically rawness and redness and a rash and like rubbery skin, especially in my breast area. And that my breast area was like peeling. And so I had to put, consistent moisturizers on to heal that area. Um, Other symptoms that I experienced and currently experience being on treatment is that I'm on induced menopause. And so um, that really changed a lot of my lifestyle because being on menopause itself is hard, but especially doing that at a young age and doing that long before you had anticipated experiencing menopause has been really hard. So that includes the hot flashes, the night sweats, um, it impacts your vaginal health, your sexual health, um, impacts you from, being able to potentially have pregnancy. Um, because chemotherapy might make me infertile, I had to freeze my eggs right before getting on chemotherapy. And I was told that obviously when I'm on medication, I'm not supposed to be getting pregnant. So this whole experience has also impacted my ability or chances to potentially have or carry children of my own. I think I went through a lot of grief and mourning um, of the loss of who I was before cancer and the opportunities that I thought I had. Um, and so one, knowing that my lifestyle completely flipped upside down, in terms of having to be, first of all, tethered to a clinic multiple times a month. Um, for a girl who likes to travel and be free has been really difficult. Um, but also the possibility of not being able to carry my own children brought a lot of grief for me because, yeah, it was the reality of knowing that if that was something that I wanted to do, not being able to have that option, or knowing that my body wouldn't be able to potentially do something like that because it would risk my life. Um, yeah, it was just really shocking. And I definitely had to hold both the grief of that news, but also trying to balance that with the gratitude of having the research and the medication and being connected to medical doctors and a team that can essentially keep me alive. So those things aren't mutually exclusive, but sometimes it was hard to balance both of those things at the same time. Y'all, this Wednesday is my last chemo infusion. I'm so excited. I'm so juiced. I'm going to be able to breathe again. I'm going to be able to feel normal again, at least whatever normal is these days for me. Um, what should I wear? Should I wear a wig? Should I rock it bald? Should I wear my birthday suit? What should I eat? Should I have like a Last Supper? Um, I should have like a really dope ass breakfast that morning. And then, like weeks later, when I'm feeling really good, I want to have a celebration dinner. What did you guys do after your last chemo infusion? So I ended up getting a lumpectomy because the chemo at that point had worked well enough to prevent me from having to get a mastectomy or a double mastectomy, which I'm very privileged to have experienced. I know that's not everybody's experience. Um, and so I, went into surgery day. I was knocked out and I worked up. I woke up with a whole new set of titties. Um, and yeah, that was a painful experience. Like the healing process definitely took at least 6 weeks just to heal. But, long after that, my breast started to continue to heal and change, in terms of not only the shape, but the look. And at first, when I saw them, I was like, no, it was just like, oh, because I really liked my boobs before. But eventually, I got used to the new changes and I had to learn to love my body, and accept my body in this new form, that it was. And that's also part of the mourning and grieving process, that many of us who are cancer patients or survivors experience. Um, but the lumpectomy created a major scar. It's kind of like a Frankenstein looking scar on my breast. And then we did a breast reduction or a breast lift on the right side to kind of match, um, the left side as much as possible. Um, and to commemorate my cancer experience, as well as to not cover up the entire scar because that's part of the experience too and part of the commemoration of what I went through. But I got some pretty cool tattoos on my breasts, much later when I was able to and after I healed. And so I'm really proud of them because it was a way for me to love my body, in the new state that it was, and do something that I probably didn't think I would ever do. So that was cool. In my case, when I tested for the 80 something gene mutations that can potentially cause cancer, um, I tested negative for all of that. I did have, third cousins, and aunts from different side, not immediate aunts, but more distant aunts, who had cancer, who died of cancer, or who tested positive for a gene mutation. So I thought maybe at that point, that maybe we do have a history of breast cancer in our family, but it wasn't immediate. And so luckily I didn't have the gene mutation, which raises a lot of questions about, like, well, then, how did I get cancer? And while we still don't know all of the ways in which cancer may, show up in your body, or the root causes of that, if it's not through a gene mutation, um, definitely the environmental factors, in connection or in reaction with your genes, your body makeup, where you live, what you're exposed to, like all of those things could have been a part of why I might have gotten it. But for a long time, or for some of the time in my journey, I started to feel like guilt, because I was like, well, what kind of lifestyle have I been living to have maybe gotten cancer? And, at that time, everyone's telling you, like, don't eat that, don't do this, like, don't wear deodorant that has that. And while all of those things can be helpful, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was any particular of those things, or even a combination of those things, that might have caused your cancer. And so, part of this experience has also been about making sure that I balance what folks are saying about this with, like, sound medical, scientific backed kind of research about this, and the fact that we're still learning um, about how cancer comes about with or without one of the gene mutations. I have to be in treatment into the foreseeable future, or for the rest of my life, unless research advances, or there might be other medications that come down the line that can help. But my treatment process right now includes getting an infusion every 3 weeks, taking medication every day, and getting injections every month, to essentially uh, ensure that, or it's not really to ensure, but to help with keeping the cancer at bay, or prevent it from returning. Um, on average, I get scans. So there are scans that I get, every 3 months, every 6 months. But depending on what shows up on those scans, sometimes I have to get additional scans. For example, that happened recently, where maybe something came up on my bone scan, or something came up in my mammogram, and now we have to do additional scans to compare all of the images to ensure that, it's nothing. Um, in my current state, I'm in the what they call the no evidence of disease phase, um, which some people think, like, oh, you're a survivor. But as because I have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, or I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, and I had advanced cancer, um, I can't just stop taking treatment. And when I tried doing that, or not that I tried, but when I was in between insurances, which prevented me from getting treatment for a certain amount of months, I experienced a level of freedom, and just kind of thinking, like, oh, my life is back. But when I went back to my oncologist, he was just like, no, girl, you need to be back on treatment, because of the possibility of the cancer returning, and research that shows that, especially when you are HER2 positive, there's a most likely chance that it can return, and it can spread to other places of your body, like your brain. So after that kind of come to Jesus, experience with my oncologist, I made a conscious decision. And after I figured out, all the insurance stuff, I made a conscious decision to return back to treatment. I decided to document my journey on TikTok and on Instagram, because I wanted to ensure that other young women, and particularly women of color, were more aware of this experience, and that it can happen to them. And reports have shown that more and more young women are getting breast cancer under the age of 40. And so I wanted to ensure that they had the knowledge, the tools, the resources, um, the support. A lot of folks also mentioned that my videos enabled them to not only learn more if they were going through it, but also know how to support their friends or family members who might be going through it. Um, and I try to maintain my level of joy and humor during cancer, which included some dark comedy about, all the experiences you have. Um, and that, from, what folks have told me, instilled hope and laughter and positivity, going through some really dark times. Um, and I think it's so important to be grounded in community. It's so important to share your story, not only to raise awareness, obviously, and to help somebody that might need that support, and might need the additional kind of nudge to advocate for yourself in ways that sometimes we might not, because we don't know the language, we don't know the jargon, we don't know how to navigate these systems. I encourage women to continually advocate for their needs, um, to get the exams, to ask for a second or third opinion, even if they're being dismissed or not heard in the process, to find the right medical practitioner that will listen and that will respect your voice and that will believe you. I think this process is a lot about, radical acceptance, because there's so much that is out of your control, um, and so much that changes in your life. And so I think it's really a journey about going through that acceptance and finding new ways to take care of yourself, finding new ways to support your mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health, finding new ways to relate to others, finding new ways to find your worth and value that's outside of what you can contribute or physically do, or what kind of provided validation for you, whether that's your career or your status or the ways in which that you showed up or function in your family or in your community. This process is about taking a step back and really honing in into who you are and loving yourself in all of you without it being attached to any outside, validation, or this kind of very set ideal of what you thought your life can look like, because it's bound to change, some for the worse, but a lot for the better as well, because it wakes you up to a lot of things and helps you reevaluate what is most important in your life. And so really thinking about what this process and journey is teaching me. What am I learning from this experience? What do I need to accept now in my life is something that I think helps to kind of not only instill hope, but keep you grounded and keep you staying resilient through this process.